All right, good morning. It's January 15th, the Senate Judiciary, and we have Jennifer Pullman, the Executive Director from the Center for Crime Victim Services, just to provide us an interview or an introduction and general overview of some thoughts for the upcoming session, any priorities or anything like that. So yeah, the floor is yours. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Welcome back to all of you, and welcome to Senator Matos, new face, for me at least. And I'm sorry that I'm not there in person. For the record, I'm Jennifer Pullman, the Executive Director of the Vermont Center for Crime Victim Services. And my children had a delay in their school this morning, so again, I could not be with you in person. I appreciate the opportunity to give an introduction to the center and to speak to some of the things that we're thinking about for this year. Especially, I think, because the center is a really odd agency, and some of you have gotten some familiarity with us, but we are a quasi-state agency. We're one of 5 in the state. By that, I mean we are designated in statute as a state agency, but we are not state employees. As I understand it, there was a decision back during the administration of Governor Dean that they wanted to add on some state agencies without increasing the payroll that the state was responsible for. So we're one of these limbo agencies that kind of doesn't lay any place in a very clean manner. That being said, we are established in statute. We have certain roles and responsibilities to the state and to victims and survivors and to our allied stakeholders. We provide services and support for all crime victims and survivors, and for programs that serve them across the spectrum, starting even with some prevention efforts to post-conviction services as well, and then ones that lie outside of the traditional spectrum. We provide a lot of support to restorative justice programs, legal services programming for victims and survivors. So we have over 267 different individual subgrantees in the state. So we really have a good finger on a pulse of what's happening across Vermont. As far as the programs that we offer, the Victims Compensation and Sexual Assault Program is a direct service program that we provide. The restitution program, again, is a direct service program. Our grants program, again, is working throughout the state to provide support to programs. We provide training. We have a Victim Survivor Advisory Council that I'll speak more about. And then we have public policy functions. We don't really have a department. That's me. So I'm the ED and the policy person. And I'll speak just a little bit about each of these, if that would be helpful. And I do want to speak to funding. I don't want to get too much into the weeds on that because it is rather confusing, but that is going to be one of our priorities. As far as victims' compensation, I think that these are programs that, especially when you're working with your constituents, restitution and compensation are the 2 programs that we can provide probably the most support. With victims' compensation, I do think, and again, I could be accused of bias, that we have one of the stronger programs in the state in terms of being victim-centered. What is really important for folks to understand about victims' compensation is it only depends upon a finding of probable cause that a crime has been committed. And for the crimes that are generally considered, they're more of a personal nature, but all it requires is probable cause. So we receive an affidavit from a law enforcement officer that asserts that there's probable cause that a crime was committed. We can begin to work with the victim, with the advocate, to provide immediate support for certain expenses. Generally, largely, we're getting claims for medical expenses, mental health. We provide support for transportation, childcare, temporary emergency housing. Crime scene cleanup is a really huge way that we're able to help families in the immediate aftermath. Funeral expenses are becoming a larger and larger portion of our compensation claims. So those are some of the different ways we can help. We just brought on a new program that we think promises to provide a lot of support for victim survivors, especially of domestic violence. We're working with a national program called ReloShare, which allows us to directly pay for the costs of a hotel for a victim that is in need of emergency housing. The victim does not have to provide a license, does not have to provide a credit card or a picture ID. So for those of you who've checked into a hotel, we know there's no way that you're able to get into a hotel normally without having all of those documents. And for victims and survivors, it's a safety issue. And also many of them, as you all know, don't have access to their own individual credit cards and those pieces. So that's a new service that we're able to work across the state to provide support with. Oh, sorry. And I do also want to say that these are not funds that are available or provided through taxpayer dollars. We get that question a lot. These are all funded with special funds. And we have a Victims Compensation Special Fund that is supported through fees and fines on traffic tickets and on criminal convictions. So these are not supported by tax dollars. We do go through a verification process. It's not simply that somebody makes that claim. We work with doctors, we work with mental health professionals, we work with others to, again, ensure that they're crime-related expenses. Unlike other programs, we do not require that victims have to cooperate with any prosecution. Our program is not prosecution dependent at all. And unlike other states, we do not require that victims have to file within a year, and we do not close out their claims after a certain amount of time. We understand, and I know there are folks around this table who understand that trauma shows up in different ways throughout the lifespan. And so our program is there as long as there are $10,000 remaining in that person's cap, because they do have an overall cap for their crime-related expenses. For the sexual assault program, I'll be brief, and this might be of most interest to you, unfortunately, who may have constituents in college towns or who live near colleges. Our sexual assault program is administered through our COMP program, but instead of requiring a finding of probable cause, it simply requires that the person seeking support present at an emergency room or present to another certified medical professional for a forensic exam, a sexual assault exam. If they do so, and they do make that report, we are able to pay for that exam. We are able to pay for post-exposure prophylaxis treatment in case they are afraid that they may have contracted HIV. We provide support for STI treatment, and we support 20 mental health counseling visits. And again, they also don't have to report to their insurance companies. We were particularly thinking about the college age population who often are still on their parents' insurance and didn't want them to get that explanation of benefits that would indicate that they had presented for a sexual assault exam. So we work with the insurance companies, we work with the hospitals, have many MOUs in place, and that's a program again that we're able to offer. So victims compensation requires probable cause, nothing more. The sexual assault program requires only that the person present to an emergency room or to a sexual assault nurse examiner, makes a report and obtains a forensic exam. With restitution, we again are unique. We kind of turn the system on its head, and for a variety of extremely good reasons that'll be right within this committee's wheelhouse. Provide some context. Back in before 2006, restitution was ostensibly collected by the Department of Corrections. Individuals who had failed to pay could be jailed, were jailed, and taking up bed space because they had failed to pay, which doesn't help the victim or survivor because you don't make money when you are in jail. Probation officers were spending a lot of time on this, chasing those who owed money, and it just was a system that wasn't working out. DOC contracted with an outside entity called Gragel, and they handled the collection. They tacked on a fee on top of that to those who owed restitution, and their collection rate was about 16%. So we had victims and survivors not receiving payment. We had those who owed money were put in jail, and probation officers were not utilizing the time in the way they felt was most effective. So Vermont did something different. What Vermont did at the time was created a state of Vermont restitution unit that is entirely funded through a 15% surcharge on tickets and convictions. Again, it's not there's not a single taxpayer dollar that goes into this fund, and through that fund, we are able to provide a lot more immediate support and alleviate some of the pressures on DOC. With a restitution judgment order, which is generated after there's been a sentence, after there's been a conviction. So again, this is different than victims' compensation. It needs to go the route of having actually gone through the process and there having been a conviction or a plea in which restitution is stipulated to. With a restitution judgment order, we are able to provide up to $5,000 pretty much immediately to an individual victim in restitution. So if they are, or whatever amount they owed, if it's an individual victim, we work with the victim, we work with the advocate, verify the losses that have already been ordered, and can make that payment out to a victim or survivor within 30 days. And that's incredibly helpful because especially for many of the cases that victims' compensation can't cover, I'm thinking of home improvement fraud is a big one that we get, and being able to provide that level of support. I had one victim that I was working with. She's like, I never thought it would happen. I got the check and I never thought I would see a dime. And most of our orders are under $5,000. So we are able to support victim survivors in that way. We do not, however, not look to hold folks accountable. We have a whole host of tools that our unit can use, and we are very successful at collecting. About 48% have a 48% collection rate. We do not tack on any fees or fines. We work with those who owe money. We actually provide a lot of referral services. We work with, send a lot of folks to working fields. One of my favorite stories is one of our collectors was talking with somebody who owed some money, and he had mentioned about smoking cigarettes. And she's like, well, how many packs do you smoke? And he's like, well, 1 to 2 a day. And she like broke down what that cost him. And the next month when they spoke, he said, I actually quit. He said, I never thought about how much it was costing me to smoke cigarettes. So, they each have a person that they work with. So it's not a collection agency. They get to develop a relationship with folks over time. But we can garnish wages if need be. We can liens, we can go get lottery winnings, tax returns. A new one is fishing and hunting licenses. That's proven to be pretty effective about as far as getting folks to pay. And really importantly, or equally as importantly, people are not put in jail anymore if they fail to pay. So we're not using bed space to that. And we're in our accountability rate, our collection rate is far higher than it was. It's 3 times as higher. So putting people in jail wasn't accomplishing much of anything. And probation and parole officers, DOC staff can use their time to focus on risk and focus on supervision versus chasing down funds. So we're very pleased with this program. Only one other state thus far has adopted it, but it's proven successful. I'll briefly just speak to grants because I know that the committee's tight on time. As I said, we have over 65 different subgrantees and 267 different subgrants. Our biggest partner is the network, no surprise. We fund child advocacy centers, restorative justice programs, the legal partnership I mentioned, disability rights, Association of Africans Living in Vermont, the Pride Center, Prevent Child Abuse Vermont, supervised visitation programs. So you probably have, each of you in your counties, at least, I don't know, 10 programs that we may fund. And if you have any questions about what's happening in the state or where the gaps might be or what the needs are, we do needs assessments routinely, especially for our federal grants. And so we would like to think we could be a resource to you. We are accountable to the feds and to all of you. And we just went through a week-long review with the federal government. That was my first, and it won't be my last, although I wish it would be. So there is oversight of everything that we do. We have our council, as I said, our Victim Survivor Advisory Council. They currently are 6 victim survivors. We work very carefully to think about bringing folks on because it is for people who are in a stage in their process where they really want to advocate and they're able to. So we really are thoughtful about how we do that. They review all of our materials, our policies, our website, strategic plan, the letters that we send out. They also have been doing the same for other allied agencies. They're doing trainings. They're doing a 2-day training for the Department of Corrections, the entire staff on trauma-centered work and working with victim survivors. They provide testimony. So really pleased to have their insight on matters. And again, other agencies are really appreciating that as well. With respect to the funding, and then I'll just speak to the highlights. Our funding is very challenging. We ourselves are a state agency, as I mentioned, but we only receive for the center about $100,000 in general funds. The rest of the total general funds we receive, which is over $1.5 million, are straight pass-through out into the community, to the network, to child advocacy centers, to fund sexual and domestic violence prosecutors and supervised visitation programs. So again, $1.7 million in general funds, about $100,000 is retained by the center. The other are straight pass-through that we provide in grants without any administrative support for the center. With special fund dollars, and you're going to hear this, and I know that you'll hear this from the network when you hear later, that largely our programming and the grants we provide rely on special funds. And those have been in decline since 2010. There was a report in 2013, a legislative report that indicated that this is not sustainable. It needed to be fixed. We could not fund victim services with special funds. And not much happened. Things have continued to get worse as we have implemented meaningful reforms, whether it be decreasing the amount of times that individuals are stopped, or whether it be because we are decriminalizing certain things, like driving without a license, which is not, these are not bad choices. I think they're very good choices, but they do have a ripple effect in terms of our special funds. So those continue to be in decline, which means that the Victims' Compensation Special Fund, the Restitution Special Fund, and the Domestic and Sexual Violence Fund continue to operate in a deficit. This body's attempted reforms and attempted fixes in the past, none of which have resulted in what we had hoped. JFO created a report a few years ago with some recommendations, some of which were adopted that, again, unfortunately did not result in the revenues that we had hoped for. On top of that, we have some issues at the federal level. We are losing 3 of our federal grants. We have 7 grants currently that we administer. 3 are going away because the ARPA funds are no longer there. So that will create a challenge, mostly for the network programs and for the center that we draw down some administrative funds, and the network programs are funded with the 3 different grants that I'm referring to. Again, I can get more into the weeds on that when we speak more specifically about budget issues. Most concerning is that our largest federal grant, the Victims of Crime Act grant, which has supported so many core services in the state for decades, is projected to have a 40% decrease this year. We already had gone down in our state. We were upwards of $6 million at one point about 10 years ago. We're now down to $1.9 million. So with a 40% cut, we are looking at really significant potentials. We believe that we can level fund programs at this point, but next year and the year after, we do not know what that is going to look like. And I do want to underscore, and I know Sarah will do the same when she speaks, that we've level funded programs. So Vermont's been done a great job in terms of being really responsible in how we manage our funds. Other states went and spent the money, and then they don't have that rainy day. We've kept that rainy day fund, so we've never had to make any cuts, unlike other states, but we've also level funded. So we all know no cost of living, increase in benefits, all of these pieces that have really, when you get down to brass tacks, has resulted in cuts that are absorbed by the programs. With respect to priorities, this session, we do not have too many. I always try and just put a few things out there because again, I'm the public policy department, I guess. And I also usually expect to play a role in terms of some ideas that we have concerns about and trying to flesh those out a little bit more. One of the pieces that's going to hopefully come back your way will be a familiar issue to 4 of you, which relates to the changes that were made last year that were initiated by Senator Norris's bill with respect to depositions and hearsay statements of a child. The bill was focused on children who've experienced serious physical abuse, and that did pass. Was enacted, and the state of Vermont victim advocates rejoiced. The House did have a concern, and I believe this may have been brought to Senator Sears' attention and perhaps yours, Mr. Chair, that the age with respect to the hearsay statements, which is under 12, and depositions are under 16, that they should be the same. They were speaking about the brain science and didn't understand why there would be a reason to have those disparities in the age group. So they are intending to take that up, and I expect that will land in your committee at some point.
Just to clarify, sorry to interrupt you, that would be just for depositions?
The depositions are Rule 15 are under 16. 804A is the hearsay statements, as you know, and that's currently lies at under 12. So they intend to make, as I understand it, the ages the same. So boosting up 804A to reflect the same age threshold that's in 15.
So those hearsay exceptions would apply for jury trials, right?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
The other provisions that we are really working with other stakeholders on focus on a couple of tweaks to victims' rights. We've been working with a national entity, the National Crime Victims Legal Institute, and one of the pieces that she flagged is a change to our statute in 13 VSA. I don't have my note. 13 VSA. It speaks to the victim's rights in post-conviction relief matters. Right now, a victim only has the right to be notified, and we are going to ask that a victim has the right to be heard as well. Other states do allow for both, and for victim survivors to be notified, even if they are, to not be able to have a say, whether in a victim impact in the way that they do in a victim impact statement pre-conviction or at sentencing is concerning. And I know that our state is looking at more reforms to the process once a conviction has been obtained. And I think it would be incredibly critical to make sure that before any change, or at the same time that any change would be considered, that victims actually be given the right to be heard in any of those proceedings. So that's one of the victims' rights pieces that we are looking at. There are a couple of other ones that we're working with the network on that aren't quite ready at this point in time. But I suspect that we'll have those fleshed out by next week.
Thank you. Committee, any questions, comments? Great. Well, thank you for coming in. And, if and when you see bills that may be in your purview, please feel free to email me and the committee assistant, and, we can get your thoughts on things as we move along. And, also as we approach the budget, we'll definitely hear from you then too as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the time. And I wish I could have been there in person, but there'll be plenty of time for that.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's take 4 minutes real quick before Terry comes in to present his bill.